Hello, everyone, and welcome back. I am so excited to have our guest with us here today, Dr. Kit Evans-Ford. Kit is a nonviolence trainer, spiritual director, author, and professor. She is the Action Outreach organizer for Pace Bene Campaign Nonviolence, and she is the founder of Our Gross House of Healing and Hope in Davenport, Iowa. Kit, thank you so much for being here today.
Hi everyone. It's good to see you.
Thank you. So, Kit, I've been reading some of your work and it's just amazing. And in an article in the Quad City Times this spring, you wrote, "Each and every day I work with the women that we serve who are fighting to be survivors rather than victims. When we encounter people who have endured trauma, how do we help them to become survivors rather than victims?"
First of all, I just want to say hi, Pace Bene community. I've journeyed with Pace Bene since I was a seminary student, almost 10 years ago. Pace Bene is dear to my heart, and Campaign Nonviolence and the CNV promoters around the country and the world. I appreciate the good work that you all do, not just during Campaign Nonviolence Week, but in your everyday lives. So hello to everyone. Think about healing from trauma, and um, moving forward, victim to surviving to thriving. Healing is a journey. It is something that sometimes takes a lifetime. We have different stages of our healing. We have different seasons of our healing as well. But I would say, I think there is a process. We have to give ourselves permission to lament, to grieve what we've lost, because when you experience trauma, I mean, sometimes life is never exactly the same as it used to be. So I think sometimes, we have to give ourselves permission to lament. And then we have to also give ourselves permission to find the resources that we need to figure out what will help us on that healing journey. For some of us is counseling, for some of us is support groups, for some of us is our pets or our children that helps us through the journeys. For some of us is journaling, for some is yoga, for some is plants, for some is a combination of different things. And so I think it's imperative to figure out what helps our mind, body, and spirit to move forward on the path of healing. Sometimes, we have these metaphorical and sometimes literal, wounds that we nurture with those holistic care resources that I just mentioned. And those wounds become scars that will always be there, but the wounds aren't open anymore, which is a gift and a blessing that helps us to move forward in life so that we can tap back into our joy. And I think when you are able to move down that path, being intentional about care towards yourself, you sometimes consciously, sometimes unconsciously move from being a victim to surviving and thriving.
Thank you, Kit, and thank you for all your work with helping people. Um,
Oh, it's all good.
uh,
Yeah.
thanks.
Good. Yeah,
I
this is it's interesting. I've been going through like a kind of coaching for my social enterprise, and also, moving forward in my path in this kind of second part of my life, and trying to be intentional about like my purpose, my values, my goals as it relates to what I do with social enterprise and women survivors of violence. And, I was kind of thinking, okay, maybe as a community development worker, I can just start to facilitate referring survivors that come to Argos House to holistic care, and not providing that direct service, so that I could, move forward and focus more on the business, focus more on writing books and teaching and other things. But just this week alone, a woman right now as we speak is moving forward and is moving into her own place, after losing everything 2 years ago and has a history of violence. Another woman that was one of our first survivor employees, she literally got her dream job yesterday as a senior accountant for actually a mental health facility. Another survivor, this actually a survivor employee of Argos House this week alone, she got off of probation 1 year early, and she has a history of addiction. She's been clean for almost a year, and she just got off of probation 1 year early. We were able to help facilitate that process for her because she's doing so well.
Mhm.
Another survivor employee that had to take some time off. She's coming back to work next week. She had a lot of anxiety around the pandemic and also some extreme mental health realities. And now she's taken steps forward, is finally ready to start counseling again, got her medication in line and other things. And so, when I see how this work and extending compassion in this work to women survivors of violence and trauma, how it literally helps to change lives and helps to mend broken hearts and helping to turn those wounds into scars and prayerfully into something beautiful one day where they can use it to help themselves and others. So when I see these transformations happening, I've kind of been going through this journey this week, soul searching personally, but I think that God, all of those affirming things and all of those women's lives happen within a 2-day time, and it's like, okay, this work is hard. It can be hard. It can be intense as it relates to journeying with women because they have ups and downs. Trauma survivors have ups and downs, as it relates to the things that they go through. So sometimes it can be an emotional roller coaster for the service provider. But, what I'm realizing and what I realized this week, yes, my purpose is helping women survivors of violence heal, right? Helping women survivors of violence move forward on their healing journey. And because I have the privilege of being able to be connected to resources, the privilege of education, the privilege of a background in service providing, community development, and spiritual direction, I'm gifted to be able to help facilitate that process. And so, what a gift to be on the path to help people heal and to have the experience to do that as a survivor myself, but also as a spiritual director and a chaplain. So I say yes to it, and I'm grateful to be able to do the work daily.
Well, I am just so inspired by you, and I just want to thank you so much for everything you do.
Rosie, it's a pleasure. It's a
Uh,
pleasure.
Thanks. And I also think it's amazing that you wrote a children's book about Bishop Richard Allen. Can you tell me and the audience a little bit more about him and about what inspired you to write this book? Oh, and also,
Yeah.
I'm sorry,
Oh,
audience, you can find this book on the Pache Bene store. You can buy it, and you can also buy the curriculum that goes with it. So I'll provide a link below. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Thank you for asking. I should promote I should promote my book on Richard Allen much more. It sells on Amazon monthly, which is good because it's the only children's book about Bishop Allen. Um, and so yeah, I should share more about that. But I published it a few years ago. Bishop Richard Allen is the founder of the African Methodist Episcopal Church, which is one of the first predominantly African American Christian denominations in the country. He was a slave. He was born into slavery. Um, in different ways, he was able to actually save money, his resources, and purchase his way out of slavery. It was very expensive. I'm not sure how he saved $2,000 during that time in the late 1800s, but he did. Um, and one of the things that he did as a slave, his slave master at the time, allowed him to go to these different church meetings. And so because Christianity combined with African traditional religions and other things, spirituality was really important for slaves of the time. And it helped to give them hope in the midst of pain. And so he accepted his call to ministry when he was very young. One of the big things about Richard Allen, he moved up to the northern areas of the United States, Philadelphia, specifically, and he got once he was free, and he got a position at a church that was both Caucasian American and also African American. And they allowed him to preach at the 5:30 a.m. services. Well, those services, he was such a good preacher and minister, and someone with such compassion that he started to, African Americans would come to those services and they kind of flooded the space. And so some of the Caucasian Americans within the congregation didn't like that. So one day, Richard Allen and one of his colleagues, Absalom Jones, they came in the church. And because they were leadership, they went automatically to the front of the church, and they went to kneel down and pray. Well, at that time, the ushers and the white people within the congregation, they were sitting. The ushers saw these two African American men going to kneel in the midst of Caucasian Americans being there for worship service, and they pretty much went to pull them and drag them out of the church off of their knees because of the color of their skin, even though Richard Allen was in leadership there at a different time, at the 5:30 a.m. services, but because he was Black, they pulled him off to drag him out of the church. Well, when this happened, Bishop Allen, instead of fighting back with his fist, instead of, screaming and shouting, he asked to be able to finish his prayer. He wild. It was really a nonviolent direct action. All of the African Americans came together and they all formed right behind him and they walked out in protest, right? So after that kind of one of the first documented nonviolent direct actions for African Americans in the 1800s, and he writes this in his autobiography, but after that happened, instead of using that energy to rebel, to fight violently, they used that energy to start programming within their community. He used that energy to, they had nursing facilities, bank facilities that they opened. And he started First African Methodist Episcopal, the first African Methodist Episcopal church. So he founded an actual church from that energy that was birthed from that. So, I document all of this in a children's book formulation, and it's a 20 painting art exhibit as well. But with Pachabene, we always talk about two hands of nonviolence. We extend compassion for the humanity of the individual always, but we stand firm against injustice, right? And so in this children's book, we talk about this two hands of nonviolence and how Bishop Allen was able to extend compassion to those people that were very mean and violent towards him, but he stood firm by literally helping to bring change into the community and speaking up about issues of race. And so, that's a children's book on Bishop Richard Allen, and please do check it out on the Pachabene site. There's a curriculum as well for children that talks about, there's activities on geography, on math, African American literature, and other things as well.
That's wonderful, Kit. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about the curriculum in a while, but I can remember they said that he would walk before he went to and founded the church, and that incident happened. He was kind of like an itinerant preacher, but he didn't have a car, so he literally would walk from state to state, walking by foot until his feet would bleed, preaching at all of these different churches. And so there's a geography lesson in the book, and there's a beautiful painting as well that, talks about the states that he traveled to, how long it would take, and the geography around that. So it's a really creative, unique curriculum. Yeah. So thanks for asking.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
And Kit, my last question is, I know you've worked for a long time as a nonviolence trainer and of course are very active in Pache Bene. And my last question is, what does nonviolence mean to you?
What does nonviolence mean to me? Um, I think, being asked that question in a time in the midst of a global pandemic and also in the midst of, I heard someone say on the news the other day, they were like during the civil rights movement. And I had to ask myself, is this the civil rights movement, kind of rebirth? We worked to pass certain laws in the 1960s connected to civil rights and race, and so many people died and fought for civil rights, issues in the 60s, including Dr. King, Kennedy, and others. And so, I think in 2020, nonviolence for me means what I just explained. It's not passive. It means standing up against race, racism, classism, war, poverty, the climate crisis. One thing we had this conversation with Kazu, who leads the East Point Academy in Oakland, California. And one thing that he said was, we asked him, okay, what can people be doing now as far as activism in the midst? And he said, think about your vocation. What is it that you're good at? What is it that you're passionate about doing in your career and daily life? And use those gifts to work to bring about change and justice. So if you're a lawyer, use those law skills behind the scenes to help get people out of jail or to help people understand social justice or social injustice. If you're an accountant, you can use those skills to help, to raise money for certain movements. If you're a teacher, oh my goodness, our children need to know and understand certain things connected to injustice, and also need to understand how valuable they are regardless of their race, their class, their gender. So I would say, what does nonviolence mean to me? It means being able to stand up for, but it's that it helps to bring about transformation in your personal life and communal lives, but also around the world as well. And it's one thing that I've learned about, especially doing community organizing with Pache Bene for these years, is that the people who work to embrace nonviolence and peace in their daily lives, it's not something that they do on September 21st only, the International Day of Peace, which is great. We're organizing for CMB Week around the International Day of Peace. But what I've realized is that people who are really committed to this nonviolent journey, and it is a journey, um, they work to do something daily. They work to embrace this nonviolence that we talk about in their daily lives and what they do in their jobs and how they interact with their family. And nobody's perfect, but they are very intentional about being a part of this movement in their daily lives for peace, for change, for justice and nonviolence. And so, I encourage you to go to pachebene.org. We have engaged, it's exploring nonviolent living. It's a 11 lesson curriculum that really details a lot of what we're talking about now. You can study it with your family, with your community groups. There are lots of videos and other resources on the Pache Bene website. But I would say, yeah, this is something that we can embrace, not just for this current state of where we are as it relates to injustice in the world, but also something that we can embrace that can help to bring about a sense of internal peace for ourselves as well.
Oh, that's wonderful, Kit. Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you, Rose.
Oh, well, it's just been wonderful to talk to you and such an honor. And I am just in awe of all of the work that you're doing.
Oh, well, one day at a time, but you never know. It's like you never, with everything that's happening in the world, you never know how long you'll be in this world.
Yeah.
And so, make the days count, do the things that you love, try and help someone daily, and try and do the right thing. It's not complicated. Treat other people the way you want to be treated.
That's
And
right.
it would be a much better place. So I'm grateful that I'm on that journey, and I pray that I can be even a more compassionate person as I journey ahead. So thanks again, Rosie, and thank you for doing this. This is awesome.
Oh, thanks. Well, I've just been having so much fun.